The gentlelady from Florida, Mrs. Cammack, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Thompson, and to all of our witnesses here before us today. I'm very proud to represent part of the wood basket in North Central Florida, and just recently had a roundtable with my forest owners about this very issue. One of those owners I spoke with in my district recently described voluntary carbon markets as the, quote, Wild West. I have to say that I agree with his characterization. They've told me about the lack of consistent standards and the differences in returns depending on the carbon exchange. What I think shocked me the most, however, in these conversations was learning from one of my constituents when approached by a consultant working with a carbon exchange that they were going to have to pay $300,000 up front. They were told that they would have the opportunity to recoup this cost over time, but that there were no guarantees. So given this account, Ms. Merrill, have you heard, if anything, from farmers regarding upfront costs to participate in carbon markets? How do these costs compare to those associated with participating in California's Climate Smart Ag programs or USDA's ag conservation programs?
Thank you, Congresswoman, so much for the question. Yes, we have heard about high transaction costs, not only for the California compliance market, but also for the voluntary market. And that has meant largely that some mid-scale farmers simply can't get into the market. They can't afford it. The project development and verification costs are simply too high. So many simply can't afford to participate. What's different, of course, with the Climate Smart Agriculture programs, it's a grants-based program. You've got to develop a project, fill out an application, and implement that project. But we have technical assistance here in the state to support farmers of all scales and all types of operations to participate in the Climate Smart Ag programs. It's a grants-based program. It's modeled after the USDA Farm Bill conservation programs, which take an approach that we think will better meet the needs of farmers as well as better meet the needs of the climate crisis. The complexities of the carbon market are simply too great.
Well, and I would like to ask our panelists here today in person, generally, how are producers who may not be well capitalized, how are they able to enter these markets? And I'll start with you, Ms. Eckenberg.
You know, I appreciate your comments because I have often described these markets as the Wild West as well. That being said, it's a perfect opportunity for Congress to step in and provide some clarity, to put that referee on the field, create some standardization, and make sure that farmers know exactly what they're getting into. We don't want anybody to be stuck with a $300,000 bill at the end of the day that they can't pay. That's not okay. So would welcome Congress's involvement to try to figure these issues out. There's a lot of different approaches, but if we fail to act in this space, whether that be giving USDA authority to take some action, Congress writing legislation in this space, or looking to some qualified third-party neutral actors, I think this problem is just going to get worse because that ship has sailed. You know, this is happening. So what can we do to make sure that farmers are not coming up short?
Mr. Range, I caught you off guard. Sorry about that.
Well, I was just going to say that I would echo that tremendously. The payments for real legitimate carbon credits only come after you've done the practices. So that, of course, does imply that you have to invest in the technology or the whatever you need to implement those practices. But the idea that, you know, the example you mentioned, I think is exactly the kind of challenge that you start to see more and more of if there isn't some consistency and some vetting of the folks who are providing these services, or offering these things to farmers.
I appreciate that, and I'm running short on time, so I'm sorry. I'm going to have to jump real quickly. Now, Mr. Milligan, could you estimate how many of your members participate in carbon markets, and are there any lessons those members have learned?
I can only take a guess, but I know on the committee there's some people that have had some experience as to whether they had it personally or not, so I'd say the number is very low. I think to your question, it's been pretty well raised here. You know, it's kind of the Wild West. We need to have more criteria before we really know whether we're going to jump in.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.